Welcome, one. Welcome, all. We are going to be in Iowa, the Iowa Corn 350 at Iowa Speedway, and it's going to be a show. I mean, if the Xfinity Series was anything to kind of hint at what we might see in the Cup Series tonight, well, I got to say, Stats, I am extremely excited. We also saw it in practice. It almost has a feel, and I want to hear your take on this after I ask how you're doing and stuff, but it almost feels a little bit like Bristol from earlier this year, right?
It's exactly what it is. Yeah, we're gonna have some tire issues, which definitely makes for an interesting race. And it's a race where we don't have any history, so that's gonna add an element to DFS and bettors out there. So yeah, it should be interesting. And then you're gonna get the differential, and we're gonna start in the sun, and then we'll finish this one up at night, so we get a little temperature change on the track. That should have some interesting effects on tire wear as well. So you said it's going to be a show. I think it might be a shit show. As we see, last night, Xfinity, you had a very much an unowned driver win it. I was sitting there, dude. I don't know if you noticed, sitting in second at the OT, and then just demolished after that. So I was kind of watching the U.S. Open and just looking at the screen to see. So I wasn't paying too close attention, and flipped it on. And I was like, oh, look at that. It's not bad. A second place finish. And then I saw them update the laps, and I flipped on the race for the OT, and I'm like, yeah, well, this is a disaster. So yeah, there's no way if that happens tonight, if you're up top for a restart, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to hold that position because not all your drivers are going to hold their spots on these restarts. But we got to wish everybody a happy Father's Day. Of course, we got a lot of dads, I'm sure, watching today, and if you're not a dad, you have a dad. And so just wishing everyone a happy Father's Day. It'll be it's a good day of sports. Always a good day this time of year. You got the U.S. Open. We got a little NASCAR tonight. And of course, MLB screwing us as always with that 1:00 start. So we got to hop off of here and get our lineups in for MLB. Although we only have one lineup left to go with the Reds holding us up on DraftKings. We got the Colorado game, of course, that we got to wait for on FanDuel.
All right, awesome, man. It's good to know the Reds are on the slate. I should probably hop on that. I know some of those 6:40 games aren't on there, but yeah, we'll try and get done by 12:45. So we'll have about 40 minutes to talk about NASCAR. Jason Graham knows what's up. David West appreciates the support for Xavier basketball here. David, Tu Holloway is my guy. Tu Holloway, Jordan Crawford. Those are my two favorite X players growing up. Justin Dolman being number one, I should say. Chef Rank in the chat too. Chef Rank, you were the one who hit pretty big last week, weren't you? For 15K. Congratulations, man. Great hit there. Hopefully you can roll it in to this Sunday here. A fun one. Stats. I know we kind of already broke it down, right? It's Bristol from earlier this year. And if obviously it's a little bit longer than Bristol. It's 0.875 miles. It's a short track. We got 350 laps. So what we're going to want is we're going to want guys who can lead laps. Luckily, the guy starting on pole has been the best driver all season. With tire issues, though, we could see multiple drivers take the lead, hold the lead for certain periods of the race. It's a tire management race. And you said we have no real history at this track, which is correct. And that's why I think that we're going to kind of rely on, Bristol for me. I think you're kind of in a similar boat, where we saw a ton of tire wear on a short track, and we saw people thrive and we saw people dud. And in this sense, like, I want vets. I want Martin Truex starting 31st. Like, I know he can move up the pack. He's kind of safe, right? But I still want to get that upside. I mean, Chandler Smith yesterday in the Xfinity race absolutely dominated. Didn't even finish inside the top 5. Still was by far optimal. So it's kind of a fine line. Any other things that you want to add before we talk about the individual drivers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a race, and we'll talk about it a little bit more as we get into the individual drivers and we go over the list, but it could play a lot of different ways. So, I mean, this is not quite Daytona as far as how your lineups construction is going to be. I don't think we're going to leave that much salary on the table, but we can, there's going to be some chalky plays here. Some of the guys who maybe starting up top, I think this is more of a place differential race than it may be a dom race, because we could very well see one of these top doms get a bunch of laps, kind of chew up all of the lead laps, and then blow a tire, get themselves in a wreck and then are out of the race. I could easily see that happening for, let's say Larson just comes out, dominates. Usually short track, Kyle Larson starting on the pole. It's almost a lock button. He's going to lead a bunch of laps. I do think he'll lead laps here. And I guess we're already kind of jumping into that group. But, we could see a lot of cautions in this race. That's why I kind of like the place differential plays here today over necessarily guys up at the top and the dom. So we could be looking at, typically we want 1, 2 plus dominators. Who knows with this one? If like I said, if one of these guys up top chews up all the dom points and then wrecks, it's going to be a strictly a place differential type of race. So I'm kind of leaning towards the PD guys. I think the chalky place differential guys are going to be a little bit easier to maybe stomach than some of the chalkier guys who are starting up top. That's me. I mean, we'll do almost an hour here today, and almost everything we say may just be total shit when it's all said and done, because we may see just a whole bunch of guys sub 20% in the winning lineup. So it's going to be, it'll be interesting. It'll be fun. And I think it's definitely going to be a good race for the fans. Oh, the one thing we didn't mention, some of the guys have raced on this track in Xfinity. Some of them even raced last night. The difference in the guys who have raced previous years, they also have repaved this track. So that's another factor that we have to add in as well. We've got multiple grooves here, so that is going to add, I think, to some of the excitement of this race. So there's a lot going on, and it's a race where don't be afraid to fade some of the chalk and play some plays that won't necessarily be high owned. I think you can have some fun with your builds this week.
So I remember back in Bristol, we were both on playing guys at the front. We know how much trouble this car has, passing another one, especially for the lead, right? So we wanted guys up in the front, and it turned out to be the exact opposite in the sense of, oh, wow, we should have just jammed the back. And we're with tire wear this heavy, right? Like, and we saw it yesterday with blown tire after blown tire. It felt like a dozen guys had issues with their tires minimum yesterday's stats. And it probably was more, because I didn't even get a chance to catch the full race. I was more tracking online. In this scenario, are we kind of prepped where it's a short track? We got 350 laps, but I want to limit my DOMs to maybe 1 or 2 inside the top 15.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think you want to go too heavily. Like I said, it's not exactly Daytona type of builds, but think more of that mindset than the typical short track where we may want a lot more guys up front. So I think you have to be very careful with the builds. Oh, as my chair goes down and I lose height. But yeah, so I agree with you there, and I'd be very cautious taking too many of these guys, certainly in the top 10.
So I was thinking about making a rule. I was going to do a min 1, max 2. I was thinking, because I kind of had that mindset. We also have a ton of great place differential plays. A lot of these guys might carry ownership though. So pivoting off that, we can talk a little bit down the road, but I think a max 2 could be a really good rule to start, because you just look through the drivers. I'm going to segue this into starting at this top, but Truex, Gibbs, Bowman, even throwing guys like Gragson starting 23rd, Eric Jones 32nd, Dillon 36th, Stenhouse 35th. You have a bunch of guys who can move up 10 spots, right? It is not unfeasible at all. You're going to have a lot of popular PD plays. I don't really want to miss out on those, and I also don't really want to play the lottery of who's going to lead the laps, who's not. I know one guy who can. It's going to be Larson. I think he'd be my one guy I'd stick with in single entry, and then maybe try and get different with the PD plays. But that's going to be a very chalky path too that we'll talk about. But who else can we start with? Kyle Larson starting on the pole. We know what he can do. We know it's a short track. We saw Chandler Smith dominate yesterday. I could legit see him, leading almost half the race here stats, assuming tires go his way. And I feel like you see a guy maybe lead 150 laps or so, which is certainly in the realm of possibility, especially with how tough it is to pass for the lead. He would almost just have to be one of the first cars to go out, not to be out to one in that scenario, right? Where cars kind of stayed till the end and stuff. But obviously, you can lose the lead early on. I don't want to just assume that Larson's going to just dominate or whatever, but he'd be my favorite play by far. And then we're going to go down to 9.5, because I also want to kind of talk about the other end. Martin Truex Jr. starting 31st is immediately my second favorite play, because I feel like he kind of blends well with Larson. Cool, I can take Larson to dominate, especially early on. But I think these PD plays have a great chance of being able to move up the pack fast after pit stops or after green flag stops. Guys who are able to manage their tires a lot better. I know the first stage is a little bit shorter. I think it's 70, 140, 140 or something like that is what the stages are split into for 350 laps. But you can really see some progress being made, especially in that second stage to those who manage their tires. Denny Hamlin's a guy who you talk about, he can check the boxes when managing tires, especially on a short track like this. Christopher Bell's been in form. Blaney's been in form. I mean, Blaney was just dominant a couple weeks ago toward the end of the race and then ran out of gas. Sucked, but it's the case. Byron's fine too. Like, you have a lot of great options, but to me, it's Larson, Truex, Hamlin who kind of stand above the other three of 9.5K and above.
Yeah, like I said, like you said, these guys starting up front. I think with Larson, here's my thing with Larson. Look, we know the guys who are favored, Larson, Hamlin. It's like it's a broken record. It's every week with these guys. And of the two, I actually, typically Larson's always getting that 1A. He's the 1A to the Hamlin 1B. And I get it this week, but if I was going to pick between the two, I think Hamlin, I already put a bet in on Hamlin. So I kind of like Hamlin for the reasons that we talked about with this may be similar to Bristol, because I don't think there's anyone in this field who's going to be able to manage tires better than Denny Hamlin. So I kind of like Denny there, get off. I think Hamlin will be, I think Larson will be higher owned than Hamlin. So I don't mind that play as well, getting off of Larson. When you look at the top, Bell is one of the more interesting ones. I missed it. If you said it, I apologize, but he's starting in the back. Did you mention that? And as my phone was ringing while you were speaking, so I missed some of your some of what you said. But yeah, Bell starting in the back. For me, that's actually a good thing. That's going to drop his ownership. I think in a race that we expect to have a lot of cautions, Bell, I think it actually may help Bell as far as saving tires. He's not going to be one of the guys out front. I think where you're going to see a lot of the problems could potentially be the guys who are out front, which throws a whole monkey wrench in DFS, right? So it's the guys leading laps, the guys who are the fastest. Those could potentially be the guys who are going to have some tire problems, where I think a Bell starting in the back, we get a bunch of restarts. He may even get himself, and they're pretty good at this, he could get himself on a different pit strategy, maybe, different tire strategy, and he'll eventually find his way up to the top. So I think a lot of people are going to get off of Bell, and I think this is an opportunity. He's really good at these type of tracks. I think this is an opportunity for Bell at lower ownership than we would have gotten him. So I kind of like that play as well, getting off of Larson. Truex, of course, starting in the back. We know how good Truex has been on short tracks. I think he is a very safe play for where he's starting, the 31st position. So I'm going to be leaning heavier on place differential than I am necessarily on Dom points this week. So I think of this group, I think the safest very well may be Truex with that starting position. So I do like him there. Blaney starting at that second spot. Is it possible that he beats Larson and gets out front? I think it is. I don't know what number you'd put on it. The probabilities there, does it happen 25% of the time, 30% of the time, something in that range? But I think there's enough of a factor or enough of a probability that Blaney can get the jump here and be the one who gets those down points. It's certainly possible. Or Larson just has trouble early, and then Blaney's the beneficiary of that. So I think in 150 builds, you definitely have to have some Blaney in there as well on your builds. And then Byron, I think, will be the lowest owned of this group. But starting fourth, not an envious starting position for DFS. I would be cautious here on getting too heavy on Byron. I'd rather get Blaney. I think he has a little bit better chance of getting the down points that we need than Byron does. So I think the safest play in this entire group down to 9,500, I think it'll be Truex. And I do like Bell as an option to where his ownership's going to be low. I do like that option as well to kind of get off some of the chalkier Larson and Hamlin.
Yeah, it's a great point. Forgot to mention. Yeah, Christopher Bell, backup car. Cindric, or is it backup car? It's both Christopher Bell and Austin Cindric going to the back of the pack here. Great thing to mention that too. Christopher Bell will get his ownership dropped. Yeah, probably below 20%, you would think, just because of all the other options around him. Yeah, I think that's kind of very interesting there. I do like your case for it being made where it's just a lot of cautions, being able to kind of just slowly move up the pack. And next thing you know, were you really expecting Christopher Bell to jump out and get Dom points in the first half of the race anyway? No. So what's changed? I mean, what's changed is maybe he has a potential of getting lapped, but I mean, we saw it with the tires yesterday. I'd be shocked if yes, BG3 mentions it, a caution every 30 laps. I'd be shocked if we went 70 laps in that first stage without a caution of some sort, and maybe even two. So I very much like that.
Jake makes a good point as well, that they're going to be racing. This is a slippery track, which who do you think about on slick tracks like this? I mean, it's basically Larson and Bell are the two guys. So that's another reason I really like Bell in lower ownership. If it's going to be slick and these cars are going to be all over the place, I think that's an advantage to Bell as well.
Yeah, it's like wheelman is what you want. I mean, goodness. I mean, we saw it too. I mean, Josh Berry in Bristol. I know we haven't gotten to him yet, but like some guys made an impression on me during Bristol, and Ty Gibbs is one of those guys. And we're gonna go into that lower 9K, upper 8K range here, right? And Ty Gibbs is gonna be the one who's the highest owned of this bunch. What he did in Bristol, he was a dominator for a large portion of that race. I think almost the first half of that race, he had the most Dom points, and I know that he ended up staying out after he blew a tire in hopes of a caution. And I think that kind of sabotages race a bit. I might get him and Hostmar confused in that situation, but I know that they both blew tires that race. Both made a positive impression on what they were able to do. And Gibbs starting 27th, 9K. We talk about how PD points are important, that we think is going to happen in this race. Someone who did race at Bristol, at least during the 2/3 of the start. I like Gibbs a lot here, and I know everyone's going to be in that same thinking. Logano is a guy who I'm just going to say I'm going to probably be passing on. I think you mentioned it with Bell, like much lower ownership than we would expect with Bell. That could put, kind of in the same ballpark as Logano, who I still think sees 15, 18%. And that's kind of where I think Bell could fall into. And I'd much rather have the guy, starting 10th, higher price tag than Logano here, just because Logano's been just mediocre for the most part. I don't want to spend for mediocre at 9.3. Doesn't really offer upside, with PD, or doesn't really offer upside with Dom points. But you know who does? Keselowski. Keselowski has a little bit of that upside with Dom points potentially. Talk about managing tires. It's a lot of green flags in Keselowski's favor, despite the starting position of 5th. He could be someone that it's in that Dom group where I kind of want to get a little bit higher on. I wouldn't mind Keselowski a little bit, but Tyler Reddick also there. You got Chase Elliott. You got Chris Buescher. Some of these guys who are just fine. Like Reddick is fine. Elliott is fine. But Buescher, I'm probably off this week's stats. But what about you? 8.5K to 9.3K here.
So, yeah, let's just start at the top. I think I'm going to like Logano more than you do. I'm actually taking him in the betting markets as well. There's a whole Logano, however you say, I get it wrong every week. There's a whole thing with he is the new track kind of tamer. I mean, he does really well at these new tracks. He's got and look at his recent history on short flat tracks, been pretty good as well. 5th at Gateway, you had a 2nd at Richmond, Martinville, 6th place. So I think Logano is very much in play, and I have him in the betting markets. I'm going to be over the market on him this week. So not just with the new tracks, I think just short tracks in general, I kind of like having him here. So so I'm not all in, but I'm definitely over there. I'm going to skip Keselowski for a second. I do like what you said about Ty Gibbs. I think Ty's going to run really well. And the 27th start, again, back to that place differential. I think he's one of these guys he's got potential to win the race, but certainly top 5 upside. And where he's starting at 27th, I think that obviously is going to increase his ownership, but he's one of the better chalky plays, I think, on the slate. So I do like Gibbs. We'll have to figure out, we're going to have to help Frank again this week. Last week I told him just lock Buescher. I don't know if we have as good a lock as Buescher was this week, but Gibbs won't be that guy for me. But I think Gibbs is a pretty solid, one of the more solid chalky plays. But Keselowski, I think it's another guy who's going to be low owned, and for his start position of 5th, I think he can. I think I like him better on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, I think I'm not in love with the play, but certainly can run up near the top and be a factor. I think he's going to be a little overlooked. I don't think there's anyone really in the field here that you're going to totally fade, especially these top drivers. So I think in the 150, even in your 20, I think you want to sprinkle a little Keselowski in. If you have a 20 build, if you're making 20, maybe you'd have one Keselowski. You definitely, I don't think you want a full fade, one or two of him in there. Maybe even in a 3, maybe throwing one in there. I just think you're going to have to make some unusual plays and take some of these lesser owned guys. I think Keselowski, with his experience, has a shot here to finish really well, even if not win this race. Reddick's had some success in short tracks of late. Again, starting 8th. I don't really love the starting position. He will have some ownership here, 25-30%. I think this is a guy that I think you can get under on a Chase Reddick. Again, I think you want to get under on a lot of these guys who are starting in the top 10, who are going to be chalky and maybe getting a little more on the market and a little bit over on some of the lesser owned guys who are starting up there, right? So that's kind of how my builds are going to be, or how I'm thinking about it now. I haven't really made my builds yet, so I don't want to get too heavy on any of these guys who are teetering on the 30 to 40%. Guys who are starting up that high. And then Chase Elliott, I think Chase can run real well here. I think he was fast. I think he's got a fast car. And the one thing you worry about with speed in this race is the fact that speed may hurt because of the tires. So that's going to be a factor as well. Not the best of starting spots. Starting at 9th won't be high owned, but I think it's another guy that you might want to get at least market or close to it, if not a little bit over. So I think you can. I would safely feel comfortable. I'd feel comfortable at the 20%ish range on a Chase Elliott, and I think we go down to Buescher, another guy who won't be owned all that much. 15th starting spot. Don't love. I don't love Buescher here, so I'm comfortable. Kind of, if you're not building 150 lineups, you're going to obviously have to fade a bunch more guys than I will building 150. But I would say Buescher doesn't necessarily find his way into your 3s and 10 builds and maybe even your 20s.
Yes, 100%. Let's go ahead and kind of just mention real quick. I forgot to mention at the top of the show stats. There's a lot of RPS guys inside the top 50 for the Millie Maker right now. And I know JSU was in 3rd at one point. And I also thought there was plenty of other logos, but just wanted to wish good luck to those guys. Obviously sitting in a Millie Maker on a Sunday for golf is one of the most excruciating sweats. Those stats, I was in it last year, and I don't wish 12-hour sweat on anyone, but I hope it goes JSU's way. I hope it goes any of the RPS members' way. But good luck again. We have a whole bunch of content for golf and stuff. RPS 15% off your first payment here at Run Pure Sports. You can get access to golf or Euros soccer. I know that Bryce and I did a show yesterday on that. Plenty of other sports too. Baseball has been absolutely crushing it. You use SaberSim for baseball here, and you just kind of have a glowing review. We don't have SaberSim up right now because can't get the background for it here on StreamYard. But we go ahead and just talk about what SaberSim has done for you in baseball. I know you've talked about it multiple times on this show, but what are people missing out on if they're not using it?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of late to the game on, because I've been doing this for so long. It's over 10 years now of DFS, so it's tough to teach an old dog new tricks. But jumping over to the Saber world has changed my builds in baseball. I'm using it for now. I'm using it for every sport now. So I mean, we crushed it. I mean, the month of May just took down several GPPs. We had one night of $180,000 hits between FanDuel and DraftKings. So it's definitely you've got to learn a little bit about it. So that's the advantage of joining RPS and coming in the Discord. You've got the guys from Saber in our Discord. We've got so many of our coordinators that are using the tool, and obviously you've got some of the best minds in DFS over at RPS that are going to be able to help you with your builds. And you could ask Frank. We helped Frank to 15K last week as he was working and listening to us in 1.5 speed, he said. So he was listening to us and asked a couple of questions in the Discord, and 15K later, he was a NASCAR winner. So, that I think that's the advantage that we have here at RPS is that relationship with Saber. And I just think it's by far the best tool on the market to build lineups.
Yes, very much so. And I got to admit, I love the Saber Sims contest feature where it kind of tells you what's simming at live rate, live win rate, and stuff like that. Knock on wood, stats 7.6% is the highest, and that is JSU.
Let's
So
do
let's
it.
have a good finish here for Run Fierce Forward and for JSU. No one deserves it more, as much as it pains me to say it. But let's go ahead and talk here about the 7K range now. We're going to talk about Chastain. You know what? We're going to go ahead and lump up the rest of the 7K range, so we're kind of getting into that even. So 7K all the way up to Ross Chastain. Chastain was fortunate enough to get a run last night, too. I thought that was very beneficial. You talked about it being a new track. Being able to tame that track is why you like Logano. You feel like he is a faster learner than most. You have him here. You have probably one of the most chalky options today, and probably maybe the most chalky option, Alex Bowman, starting 33rd. On the Hendrick team, you know what that car is capable of. Bowman doesn't really need to, have an extreme day to really be optimal at that tag and that starting position. A top 15 probably does it. Kyle Busch ran well last week. Another guy who ran out of gas kind of going toward the finish line there, him and Truex both somehow not making the winner, I don't think, on either one, when they both look like locks to be on the winner with about less than a half a mile to go. You also have Josh Berry, who I mentioned back at Bristol. It was an incredible race, and I don't think he's going to be popular at all. He's going to be a part of that group, though, where I'm not going to be playing like him with Larson or anyone, but I wouldn't mind a stray Josh Berry team, and maybe burns up his tires quicker than most, but that also leads to laps led early on and stuff. You never know. I'll be happy to take a risk on Berry. You got Bubba Wallace. You have Cindric going to the back of the pack. Chase Briscoe, a wheelman. You know what he can do on a short track, especially. Again, I know that Stuart Haas Racing's shutting their doors down, but they still got some talented drivers specifically on the short track side of things. So it doesn't take much to be heavy on Berry or Briscoe. They're not single entry plays at all, but they are large field tournament plays who I'm probably going to be just over the field on, because why not? They're talented enough. This track, we know it's new. Anything can happen, and anyone can really lead laps. It feels the best bet is Larson. The best bet would also be like Hamlin, and even Blaney you can throw in that mix, but don't be afraid to get funky outside of those few. Michael McDowell's here too. Daniel Suarez. I mean, you got a couple slam dunks like Bowman, but nothing really jumps off the page outside of him. Like Chastain's probably going to be the second highest owned, starting 17th. But I'm not jumping out of my seat for any of these guys here stats.
Well, I don't know. There's one guy in here who I like. That's Bowman. I think he becomes
aside from Bowman, yes.
Yeah, I think he becomes the one. If you're looking to lock a guy, I would almost lock Bowman this week at that price, starting 33rd. So that would be my guy. I don't feel as confident as I did last week in necessarily locking someone. But by the way, when Frank asked in the Discord, should we be locking anyone? I'm of the belief, look, when you're playing GPPs, you're playing to win. I'm certainly not playing to see how many I could cash. That doesn't do anything for me. If I wanted to do that, I would play the cash games and just try to finish top 50%. So I'm trying to win. So in order to do so, I think with NASCAR and in most sports, I want to lock one guy in. And I think this week in my 20, if I was building a 20 max, I think Bowman would probably be the guy that I would lock in this week. So the less entries you put, I think the more narrow you have to do it. But then the flip side of that is the guys that you're not locking in. So if we're locking one driver in, you need to be very much random. And that's what got Frank the winner. He had a couple, I forget exactly what his lineup was, but he had a couple of low-owned guys in there. You're typically going to be locking a very chalky play, and then you're going to be mixing it up with the rest. And that was a good recipe last week. We'll see if it works again this week. But Bowman would be my guy. So obviously, I like that place differential, 33rd. You mentioned Chastain. He's cheap and he was fast in practice. I think the big benefit that you get from Chastain, he got to see this track yesterday. So I think that's going to be, a plus in his favor. So I do like some Chastain. I think you're correct here. He'll be the second highest owned in this group. Bowman obviously will be the most, but I think after that you're right. I mean, we're not going to see much ownership anywhere in this group. I think one of the worst plays on the board here will be Kyle Busch starting 7th. You know, I can't even make the case to play him in you know, in I mean, you could play him in the 150, I think, because you're going to have to sprinkle everyone in. But in a 20 max, I would leave him out, and certainly anything below that. I like what you mentioned about Berry. I think he's got to be in the mix a little bit because he's so good at these type of tracks, and I think he, you know, with the potential where he's starting to get you some cheap Dom points. I think Berry, you're not gonna go too crazy here, but I think you have to have him. Even if you're throwing a single entry in there and you want to just get a little crazy with the single entry, I think having Berry in there makes some sense. So I don't mind that play at all. And I'll kind of couple that with Briscoe, where I think you have a similar position with Briscoe, a guy who has run well on these short flat tracks before, and another guy who's going to be starting up near the top, low ohm, but at that price, I think has a chance to maybe get you some Dom points. I'm not as crazy about the other guys sprinkling them in. I mean, look, McDowell, can he get up there, you know, starting 22nd? I think if things break correctly, I think if you get a bunch of carnage, that's why the 150, obviously these guys are going to be all in my 150 builds, but I can't get too high on McDowell. I think Suarez here. I think Cindric may be the worst play of the group, but I think Suarez is not too far behind where he's starting at 13th. I just don't see, I don't see a top 5 car here. I don't see him leading laps. And, Cindric just not really good on these tracks. Although he did race well at Gateway, I'm going to throw that one out. He's just typically not good at these type of tracks. I think Bubba Wallace becomes an interesting play. I think if you wanted to get over the market on Bubba, which is not going to be terribly high, he starts 16th. I think you do get some place differential upside, and I think there's potential if this race breaks a little funky, where Bubba could find himself up near the front. He is getting better at these short tracks. He never really was a short track guy. I think there's potential there. So I would sprinkle some Bubba in my 20 lineup builds. But with the only guys that I really wouldn't want to touch maybe are Busch, Cindric, and Suarez out of this group.
Yes, I'm with you. And it kind of just should be mentioned too. I mean, you mentioned it too with Bubba. I mean, we saw him. I hate comparing apples to oranges and stuff, but he was able to hold his own at Martinsville and stuff too. I mean, he's able to do it on a short track. And I don't want to come in and assume like this is exactly how something's going to go, right? Like I think that could be a mistake here. And I definitely think going higher on a guy like Bubba or, a guy like Barry or Briscoe where you're taking risks. I think Bubba's a lot less of a risk than Barry or Briscoe, but like, I'm fine doing that. And we know I just keep referring to Bristol. I'm going to become a broken record. Just keep saying this, but like talent can win out here. I mean, it doesn't matter really how fast your car goes. And when you're racing this style where you're trying to manage the tire, and ultimately whoever's able to kind of get the most out of their tires can win. Whoever can, just keep the car on the track basically the entire time without getting into issues. And I'd be happy to take a chance on those guys. McDowell, same thing, starting 22nd. It's enough to be able to kind of make enough gain on PD. I think during the race at Bristol too, he got 11th. So there's paths to these guys hitting. I'm not going to go out of my way for them. But again, I think there is multiple paths to these guys hitting. Daniel Suarez, I'm a complete X him out. Cindric, I'm Xing out. You mentioned not great on this type of track. And honestly, I think I'm going to X out Busch at 8.2 just because I'm trying to trim up my pool a little bit more stats. But he's fine. But like I'm just going to maybe Xing him out on this slate. 7K and below, we're going to start off with a pretty chalky one. Noah Gragson, 6.9K, starting 23rd. He'll be very popular. His odds to win are incredible, I should say. What is he? 28-1, which is the best odds in this range. Is actually lower than Chris Buescher, which kind of shocked me. You also have Todd Gilliland, who Yeah, we've seen what he can do. Martinsville is also a great impression on him. Carson Hocevar, Ryan Preece, Eric Jones, Allmendinger, Austin Dillon, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. both starting 35th and 36th. Those are going to be two very popular plays purely because again, PD is important. We want place differential guys, but also those cars are faster than 35th and 36th, right, Stats?
Well, Gragson was maybe the fastest car in practice, and I think that's what's bumping up the odds on him here. So what happened was I think he got a little loose during the qualifying, and that's why we're getting the benefit of having him start where he is starting, which is 31st. So I'm sorry, 23rd. I was looking at at his odds 31-1, but yeah, so I think he's going to be chalky, and between him and Bowman, these chalky guys that are cheap to start, I kind of lean more towards Bowman. I think Bowman has a little bit more upside, and I have a little bit more confidence, even though the car was fast. I'm not necessarily all that excited about speed. We saw last night, Mara was not the fastest car, won that race. So I think the speed may be overdone here. So I think if there is going to be a fade coming from a PD position, or not necessarily a fade, but a guy that you could get under on, I think Gragson is okay. I'm just less confident here in a Gragson than I am in a Bowman when I was trying to figure out who I would advise as a lock button type of play in a 20 max, 3 max situation. Let's talk about the other guys down here that are going to get some ownership. I think Austin Dillon is a guy that, starting 36th, which is the last spot. I think you have to. I think, again, this becomes a place differential type of race. We think you're looking at this almost from Daytona type glasses. And I think, when you get a guy like Austin Dillon, who's starting in the back, a guy that we probably really haven't looked to all that much this year, he's going to quickly become probably one of the stronger cash plays, with another guy who is not necessarily a cash play option typically, but that's Ricky Stenhouse. Now, you always worry about Stenhouse. We're going to worry about him on a slippery track. I mean, he's going to do some stupid things. So again, if you want to fade that play, I'm cool with it. He will be higher owned, and I actually think it might be a decent fade on Stenhouse if you want to kind of pivot off of him and maybe just play. If we don't need both the 6,000 and 6,200 guy in our lineups, I think I'd feel more comfortable with Dillon than I would Stenhouse. Stenhouse is going to be probably slightly more owned here than Dillon. So I just don't trust Stenhouse necessarily on this type of track in this situation. But I think it's going to be a wild type of race. So I think all of these guys really, again, like a Daytona, like a Talladega, I think a lot of these guys at the bottom, because if we do get a crazy race, there's no reason that a lot of these guys or one of these guys from the bottom can't have a strong finish. That's just one of these wacky, they're out on they could be out on the track at the right time during a caution, kind of stay out there, get on a crazy pit strategy late in this race and finish in the top 15. It could happen for any one of them. I think the other guy that people are looking to, which I don't think his ownership is going to be all that high, someone mentioned it in the chat earlier, is Nemechek. And, he's, again, another guy starting 34th. Any of these guys in the back, I think what you worry about on short tracks is that they could get massively lapped, and then they really don't have the ability to get up and move up much in this race. So I think you have to be cautious with these guys. I think I kind of prefer I think I'm preferring more with a mid-range approach as opposed to a stars and scrubs. I'm looking at the middle as being more where I want to focus on making my lineups than a lot of these cheaper plays. I think the guys in the previous group that we talked about, that 7K plus, I think I feel better being with those guys, and then maybe playing a lot of the, between the 7 and 9K guys, as opposed to dipping down into the 5K range. But we don't know what to expect. And this could easily be, we could get two of the top guys. Larson just runs the race that he's obviously capable of doing. He leads like 200 plus laps in this race. And, and we kind of find ourselves in a position where we have to put him with one of these guys sub 7K. and they find their way in. I mean, one of these guys at a minimum will have a strong finish. It's just a matter of can we figure out which one of these guys are. Dillon and Stenhouse give you the best upside. I think Nemechek's an interesting play that a lot of people, while I think his projected ownership is probably lower than where it's going to be, just from the fact that I keep hearing some chatter about Nemechek. So I think he's going to wind up being a little higher owned than maybe even the projections have. And then for the rest of it, I think it's really a crapshoot. I think just some of these guys are just starting too high, so you'd have to throw them out. Guys like Haley, I think LaJoy starts too high for me. But yeah, I would be looking, Allmendinger at 18th. I just think is just a terrible play. Gilliland starting at 14th. These type of guys, I think the ones that are starting up high, you can kind of throw them out. And I think it's if you're making a 20 max or 150, whatever it is, you're going to just have to sprinkle these guys in and hope for the best.
So here's a quick question for you.
Jones. Someone mentioned Jones. Yeah, Jones not a bad play either here at 32. I think he was slow in practice, but I don't know if that really matters here. I think it's just going to be a matter of I would put him right below the Dillon, Stenhouse, John Hunter Nemechek plays.
And Mayer was terrible in practice, ended up getting the W yesterday. I know he didn't dominate or anything like that, but it just goes to show that, yes, speed isn't everything. It's not the one thing that we just solely want to focus on. And what's even better would probably be those 10 lap, run times they've had, or, who was able to kind of sustain the most speed. I think that would be the most telling. I haven't gotten to look too much into the practice data, but I also want to ask you this question. Nemechek got 4th at Bristol this year, right? And that's the main comp, or 6th at Bristol, my bad. Do you think that is playing a part into him probably being one of the higher owned cheap guys on the entire slate? Is just because of that recent finish? Because otherwise, I'll be honest, stats, I've been very unimpressed with Nemechek this season. I know this is kind of in his wheelhouse. It's a fine track for him and stuff, but I never want to be just completely overweight on it.
I would totally agree with you here. I think you have to kind of read them. We need to a little bit of there's a little bit of art. There's a lot of art to the DFS world. Seeing what you read when a lot of people, and that's kind of the advantage of doing this, where I talk to a lot of the people in our Discord. I can read our Discord and doing the show. When you get a guy that doesn't project all that well, is not projected to be high owned, and then he starts creeping up, like as the day and as the race gets closer, a lot of people start talking him up. A guy with, like you said, just has not been impressive. I think it's not a bad fade play at all. So I hope that he gets up to like a 20% ownership, because I think you're going to want to be under on Nemechek. Does he need to be in your builds? I think so. But if you want to totally, in your 150, I'm always thinking of how I'm doing it. But if you want to be a total fade in a 20, I'm cool with that, because I think that could get you some leverage. Not only locking players in, totally fading some guys who are going to be, a 20, 25% owned. That kind of does the same thing for you as locking a player in as well. Just remember, the more you do that, locking a player or totally fading someone who's going to be decently owned, the more crazy and more diverse you need to be with the rest of your lineups.
Yes, very much so. We are running just on schedule here. So you already talked about the 5K range. One thing I just wanted to mention, because I said it last time, I'm done doubting Justin Haley. I'm just going to continue bashing him in, even starting 19th. He's just good, right? Like, if he held position, it wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't even shock me if he improved upon that position and potentially got like a top 15 or something. I know it's just crazy to say at this point, but he's just been incredible. LaJoy, I think I'm with you. Fade. Zane Smith, fade. Harrison Burton, Daniel Hemrick. I don't really need a reason to get cute. You said, right, stick in the mid-range. You don't really have to just go beyond that, especially for single entry. What's making you bash in 3 studs? There's nothing, right? Like, you don't really want to do that. Just play these, great PD plays that we got across the board. Maybe find one differentiator, maybe 2 if you got it. Make sure your rules are in line, but single entry, don't make it more difficult than SB. Don't play any of these scrubs. I mean, like, I know some people might want to punt, and Justin Haley's a guy who did fine at Bristol. He held position there, but I'm not going to just bash in these values. Nemechek, there's a reason why he's popping a lot of ownership too, though, is because you just gravity pulls everyone doing. Like, I mean, you're not clicking Zane Smith's name. You're not clicking Harrison Burton's name down there. LaJoie. I mean, he's right next to some scrubs, and I do think he's going to get above 20% stats without a doubt. And it's going to be kind of competing against Stenhouse, Dillon, Jones, where, look, they're good plays. I don't want to say they're not good plays, but I'll be underweight on Nemechek compared to the field, that's for sure. Let's go ahead and get into our drivers of the day. So I don't have the ownership's up from Sabre on the screen, but I do have them up here. If you say a driver, you know what? Just don't name Larson, Bowman, Truex, Gibbs, or Hamlin. There's only 5 that I'm not going to let you take. I'm going to throw in Stenhouse in there too. All right, the obvious. Outside of the obvious, who is your driver of the day here for Iowa Speedway, the Iowa Corn 350?
I'm going with Logano. So that's going to be my guy. It's going to be pretty low owned. I like his chances. I like the narrative that Logano figures out new tracks better than everyone else, and he wins the race, gets you and gets into the nuts lineup.
Love it, love it. I will go a little bit off grid here, I think, and I'm going to go really low owned. And the reason is I'm not playing him in single entry. I just want to put that out there. I'm not playing this guy in single entry. He's not going to be in my main lineup, but I will be at least double the field on him. Chase Briscoe. I just like the talent. I like a wheelman. Give me a wheelman here, right? A guy who just can absolutely get the job done. Him and Barry were both fine in Bristol. I mean, Barry was a little bit better and stuff, but Briscoe, I just think comes in like 5% owned or something like that stats. And I think greater than 10% of the time he's getting top 10s and being optimal. And I think he has the ability to keep that car inside the top 10. God, even a guy who could potentially lead a couple laps or get some Dom points as a sneaky play. Very, very high on Briscoe. Not a main entry play, more of a large field tournament only option, but I do want to just kind of shout him out. That's kind of where I stand. And here's a quick question too before we end. Jake asked a good question. Do you think the tire wear will be less with the race being at night? 7:03 start time. What, Iowa, is that on the central time? I think Iowa is central time. So they'll have 3 hours of racing in the daylight, but it'll also cool down as the sun kind of sets. Do you think tire wear will be a little bit less with that going on?
It'll be less. Yeah, definitely at the end of the race, it should be less of a problem. But I think the good chunk of this race, it will be a problem. So yeah, I would just play it as such. But I think maybe at the tail end of this race, we won't see any of that. But early on in this race, I totally expect to see some tire problems.
Perfect. And that's perfect for PD, right? Like, hey, let's let our guys move up and then they can calm down, right? Then it's not like Daytona where you're just waiting for a big one, you're just
big one at the end.
Don't fall apart at the end, and you can get second, maybe first this time. Stats. That was just the all good things. You have to go through a little rough patch there on the second place where you fell out in overtime. Today, overtime is going to get you first in 100K. So
I'll take it.
That's the good omen. Thank y'all for joining us again. Happy Father's Day to each and every one of you guys out there. Good luck tonight. Crack open a cold one and enjoy Father's Day with your loved ones. Bye-bye.